Greetings. You are now tuned into the Hittmobb podcast series, where we discuss the art, business, legacies, and lifestyles of music production with your hosts, Daven Vanderpool, known as PlaDD, and Paul Hendricks, known as Baby Paul. Let's get to it.
What's up, man? It's your boy Jay Hatch, Creative Space Events. We are here today for the Hittmobb podcast. I'm in the room with two living legends that I call friends. My man BpZy, my man PlaDD. These guys got a brand new series for you called Hittmobb Podcast. Paul, what's going on, man? Why are we here?
What's up, Jay? First of all, salute to you. Thank you for coming through.
Appreciate it.
Supporting the Hittmobb Podcast series, where we discuss the art, the business, the legacies, and the lifestyles of music production.
Dope.
You know what I'm saying? And this is founded by myself and my brother PlaDD, one of my best friends of many years. He built his career and his foundation being known as part of the Bad Boy Hitmen production team. I built my career. Shout out to my alma mater, the Beatminerz, you know what I'm saying? Evil D, Mr. Ward, you know, producing like Duck Down, The Black Moon, Spiff West, Helter Skelter, all of that. So,
Okay.
you know, in the interim of all of that, we maintained a friendship, and now here we are just combining our minds and resources to bring this content to you, you know what I mean?
Dope.
This is amazing, and I want to thank you for being here with us.
Absolutely, man. You all know I've always been an advocate for the creative, you know, for the last 20 plus years myself.
Yes, sir.
How did you and PlaDD actually link?
Man,
Well,
I'll let you tell it.
we met in Brooklyn at a thrift store called
Okay.
Liberty.
Okay.
And I met a lot of people from at that time that went in the game and was a big part of the game.
Digging in the crates era.
Digging in the crates era.
Yeah.
We first started out by, you know, collecting records, finding sounds, finding inspiration, finding ideas to make sounds, to make songs. And I want to make sure that, you know, I started out as a beat maker.
Correct.
Just trying to make things that I like.
Right.
Yeah, because we were a fan of the game, like, you know, just, you know, studying our peers that came before us, what we call the Holy Trinity, right?
Yeah, the
Lost
Holy
Professor,
Trinity, yeah.
Pete Rock, Q-Tip. That's what we used to call it.
Yeah, the
when we was
Trinity,
coming
yeah.
up.
Yeah.
That was the Holy Trinity of hip
True.
hop back then.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know, and drawing inspiration from the creative contributions that they brought to the culture and finding our own niche in the game.
Right.
And finding our own way to make music to contribute to the game. And, you know, like he said, we started out as beat makers. We just want to make hot beats that we can impress our peers. You know what I mean?
For real,
yeah.
And as you grow into the business of music and actually make a name for yourself, now you were like, all right, now I got to really carve my sound and really let people follow what I'm doing.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
So I know y'all was heavy on those James Brown samples, though.
Yeah. You know, James Brown was like
The foundation.
the foundation of this whole, you know, the whole game at that time.
Yeah.
And think about it, Jay. Name how many records from the 80s did you hear nothing but James Brown
Nah,
samples,
nothing but
drummers and so on, man. And, you know, I feel like James Brown didn't really get enough credit, even when he was still here before he passed, for how much he influenced hip hop culture.
Right.
You know, he's very like, is from the, you know, from the late 80s well into the 90s.
Yeah.
Because a lot, I mean, the amount of songs, the amount of sounds, the amount of everything, endless.
And I can honestly say, even from the days when we was digging, I still don't think I have the entire James Brown collection to this day.
I don't either.
It's practically impossible, bro. Because you understand, it's not just James Brown. It's the things that spawned from him. You know? Maceo and the Kingsmen, JB's, Marvin Whitney, Lynn Collins, the list goes on.
Right.
So
his influence is huge.
Yeah.
What was it about, you know, crate digging that really got you, you know, inspired? Was it just about finding new sounds? Was it about kind of maybe find your own sound? What was it about crate digging that really made you want to focus on that?
The drums.
Okay.
The drums.
Make them drums knock,
the
right?
drums was the first thing.
Right.
Like,
looking for the perfect beat, man.
you're looking for the perfect beat, you know?
Facts.
It was finding breaks that no one had.
Right.
That's it. That was the biggest inspiration right there.
Yeah, that's
and
true.
we talked about James Brown. Let's not forget the break beats.
100%.
Shout out to Street B Lenny.
Yep. Street beats and breaks.
Yeah.
That was the holy grail of hip hop.
Yeah.
If you didn't have that, every producer had to have that in their stash.
Yeah.
Right.
That was the beginning, you know, having, of course, we were using records and you're sampling records with turntables. So
Yeah, of course.
if you had the volumes, we call them volumes of Ultimate Breaks and Beats, you know, from volume 1 to like 22, 24.
No, it's 25, I believe.
25, yeah.
Yeah, it's 1 to 25.
Big shout out to Breakbeat Lou too.
Yeah.
For real. And
Crazy.
I feel like even today, it's a good source of inspiration for those who are beat makers.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, because I know I still go back to my breaks and I still hear new ideas from records, you know, when I go back through them, you know what
Of course.
I mean?
So Prestige, when you first started, thinking back to the early days, what was like your creative approach? And how is it different now?
Creative approach, you know, I started out vibing on records. I would listen. My process, I would just listen to records, listen to joints, keep listening until I find something that moved me.
Okay.
When I find something that moved me, I'll try to loop it up, try to add some drums to it. And, you know, my programming first was a little choppy.
Okay.
It took me a while to learn how to do it. It wasn't like...
That's valid.
You remember, at this time, wasn't no like YouTube and...
Yeah, of course.
And everything was manual.
You basically had to teach yourself how to do all that kind of
You
stuff.
got to teach yourself how to do all that kind of stuff.
Facts.
And you know what, Baby Paul taught me something.
Okay.
And I don't even think you remember.
I probably don't.
Because, all right, he told me that the beat is supposed to follow the music.
Right.
And that always stuck with me.
Okay.
You don't remember you didn't tell me that.
I don't remember that.
He told me that.
Yeah.
So when I programmed the drums, you know, when I first started, I always made the beat to follow the music.
Right.
Because if you listening to it, subconsciously, you know, you just thinking, you know, of the beat and how it feels.
Right.
You didn't know until you had to sit down and actually do it.
Yeah.
Right.
You didn't know that you had to make the beat follow the music.
Right. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
You know, it's so funny that you say that because, like you mentioned, I would start my ideas in that process that you just brought up.
Right.
Where I would found sequence arrangements of music first. Then I would pick out my kicks and snares or whatever, or even a chopped drum section, you know, like where you do, you know, sequence loops, you know, drum loops. And yeah, it's important for the beat to drive the music. And I think the most perfect example is your favorite record.
Right.
Le Fleur, Le Fly, Coach Guy. Because if you listen to that beat, where that bass line moves, the drums carry the bass line.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, and that's what gets you that head nod.
It almost seems like the beat's going faster than it really is. Right. I always said it to myself, I'm like, this beat is not fast, but it sounds fast.
Yeah, because of the way it's moving to the bass line.
Right.
And I think that's what made that record catch on.
Yeah.
It was the approach I took. Yeah.
Right. So see, we're talking about like humble beginnings. These guys are legends over here, you know. My man BpZy's work with, you know, the whole Duck Down team, Nas, AZ, my man Prestige, pretty much laid a lot of foundation for the Bad Boy projects that we all love and carved out a specific sound for that era that still stands the test of time now. Yes. Thinking about, you know, got obviously getting inspiration from the crate digging. What about other producers? I mean, we all have our holy trinity of producers that we are inspired or wanted to maybe emulate or be better than. Like, give me your top 3 or 4.
I definitely gonna say Lost Professor. Shout out to my Queens legend, my homie, one of my peers and one of my comrades, Extra P. But like, I think it was between him and I definitely was studying Q-Tip a lot.
Of course,
you know what I'm saying. Tribe Called Quest. I just love the sound and the sonics of their records. You know, like they were the one that took pride in their mixes, and then of course the follows Pete Rock, like we always call it, the Holy Trinity. But what I liked about Pete was the layers, you know, like, you know, similar to the Bomb Squad, but he took a different approach.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, just a lot of sample layers of stuff from all types of different records, all in one record.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I thought that was dope. So, for me, I had this like simple, complicated style where I would take, like you just said, take something that seemed real simple, but add things to it and make it a little bit more complicated.
Yeah.
That, you know, but it all worked. You know what I mean? I've seen other producers come in the game that take that same approach. You know, I don't try to have too many tracks of instrumentation in my records, but I like to make sure it still have movement and it has transitions so it doesn't sound too repetitive. You know what I mean? Well,
that's the one thing I think I really enjoyed about your production, because you were kind of almost ahead of yourself in trend. You know what I mean? Because nowadays things are that much more simple and direct. And I think you kind of saw that coming, because everybody that got on your record, records were spitters. They were guys that really understood how to get in the pocket and really, find their delivery within your approach.
Right.
P, when you were starting out, who were some of the people you looked up to?
Well, the Holy Trinity, like we said, Pete, Paul, and Tip. But we had to start with Marley because I think Marley started out. Marley Marl
100%
started out everyone because to me, I think Marley Marl revolutionized the game.
Right.
When he started with the kick and the snare, like the first record we heard that on was The Bridge.
Yep. In Peace the President.
In Peace the President. Fire to this day.
Of course.
Wow. Yeah.
Wow. He's the first one, and I know he said that, and he did. I don't know if he got enough credit for that. That changed our whole approach.
Yeah.
And of course, and then another one who did that was Paul.
Large Professor.
Large Professor. I believe he was the first one that started filtering.
Yeah.
You know what's so funny? I know you and I had a conversation about that before, and I'm really, really trying to pick my brain and think of anyone else. I mean, looking at the front door was that first hit single from Main Source, and it used that filter technique, and of course, the Beatminerz was known for that too.
Yeah,
right behind that. But was the first? Like, I really want to know.
To me, he was the first because I guess he's the first one that had a hit with it.
Yeah. Well, he was low key, almost like a lo-fi. Producer. If you listen to a lot of his records, because of the way he filtered out some of his drums, you listen to like Live at the Barbecue, right?
Yeah.
It's a super raw beat that's not loud, but it comes across loud because the artists that are on it and the energy it gave, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
So, but it's funny because I interviewed Ski Beats a few weeks ago at one of my events, and I was asking him the same question, like, who are some of the people you looked up to?
Right.
And he said Pete Rock. And he said, he did that, Whose World Is This record? And he said, I kind of emulated his sound on Dead Presidents. So I literally just sat there and I heard it in my brain.
You're right.
And I was like,
pianos and
wow, like that's literally the same record, but just Ski gave it his own approach. And I think that's what happens with a lot of producers nowadays is where we have a conversation before about like, you want to kind of chase something that's popular, right? And you don't really know like maybe where the history of production came from, and you're just kind of like doing things to find things. Right. But the idea is to always be better than anyone you may want to emulate, right? So I'm not mad at producers that say, I copied, Metro Boomin to be a dope producer, but then I gave it my approach, right? And I think that's where a lot of times it gets lost. Along the way, I'm sure you guys got a lot of great advice from other people you may have worked with, artists, managers, A&Rs, other producers, engineers. Is there anything that you take with you to this day? Maybe it's a bit of advice. Maybe it's something that really stuck out to you, like you had mentioned about what Paul said to you about the beat. Is there anything that you like really take with you every day from a mentor or somebody that really kind of gave you some insight in the game early?
Well, I believe as far as records, right? At this part, no one taught me. More the records taught me this trick. Now, I always believed the art of doing things once.
Okay.
And I'm going to tell you about that. It means that you take a record. I listen to records that was done like 30, 40 years to this day. I still listen to these same records.
Right.
And I say like, well, damn, why am I still listening to these same records? It's the way it moves me, the way I feel when I listen to it.
Right.
So I said like, wow, the art of doing things once. He did it like 30, 40 years ago, and I'm still vibing on it.
Right.
Now, a lot of people believe that since the music is old, it gets outdated, it's no longer relevant to me, which is really bullshit. Because like the same records, we see this with the 90s. Like you have records like, just say Busta, for instance. Put your hands on my eyes can see.
And look, he just helped make 3 hit records right now the past year. Hello.
And look how long, and it's still, his record still knocks. And that was done in the late 90s.
Yep, like 96, 97.
He did it once. And it still rocks.
Right.
And so the art of doing things once, I don't think no one really referenced that part of the game.
I agree with you. I feel like trying to make timeless music is about understanding what's going on in the market, but still, like we said earlier, finding your own niche approach, but also making it on a certain level of quality, not just the way it's mixed, but the way it's put together, that it's not easily repeated. because when you have the art of doing things once, like you just said, you can't just duplicate it. You can try to emulate it in the sense of using a reference of it and replaying it, like they tend to do in a lot of urban music today. But it's borrowed from something that was done already.
Right.
You know what I mean?
And even sometimes too, I think you take producers like the Neptunes, for instance, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Neptunes were like so far right or left, however you want to look at it, right? And you know, it took them a little while for people to kind of really understand their style and how they brought their things across, right? And even Pharrell being more of like the executive producer as well, and not just being somebody who made the beat per se, right? And I think, you know, it's funny because read this article on Hittmobb DX maybe like 10 years ago. And then we can do a quick take on this from you guys. And I'll tell you why it's so outlandish. But they said Nas's Illmatic ruined the world of hip hop production.
What?
And let me tell you why.
Wow.
Right? So, not that I really agree with it, but they have a valid conversation. Before Nas did Illmatic, generally,
I know where you're going.
Generally, most of the production was done by one producer.
Yes.
So he was one of the guys that went out and got Large Professor.
Yes.
He got P Rock. He got Buck Wild. He got, LES, Q-Tip. And they all brought different flavors. So what happened after that is they say, well, all these elite hip-hop artists started finding the hot guy to try to make these albums. So... I mean, what's your take on that? How do you feel that changed?
I never thought of it that way.
Yeah,
I wouldn't say Illmatic ruined hip hop culture though, because it's considered the Bible of hip hop. Like it's one of the standards in terms of elite quality hip hop.
If you were teaching a hip hop course on how to make a great album, that would be.
But I will say that it is important to find niche content, meaning that we need more of the one produced albums by one individual musician. But I think the problem was that not enough producers were able to commit their work on that level where they could deliver a whole body of work. They might be able to deliver a single or a song or two. Yeah. And then they were stuck. Yeah. You know, and that goes back to what we're saying about, doing things once. How do you make a whole body of work be diverse but still cohesive? Right. But, you know what I mean? And deliver body of work. We're only seeing a handful of producers starting to do that.
But, at the same time, Illmatic was still cohesive. And it felt like one producer did it. Yeah. The way it felt. And all the tracks, but the whole thing that people miss, I guess they produced those tracks and catered to Nas. Mm-hmm. And it's not like Nas would jump on a Neptune's track. It was none of that. Right. So those tracks were made for Nas. That's why the records come off the way they do. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I disagree because, that formula worked for that time. Yeah. But people, they saw that formula but didn't really take heed of the formula. Yeah. They just did, well, I'll take this track from this track from that track from this, and then it made an album.
And then a lot more albums.
And it wasn't cohesive.
Started sounding like compilations.
Well, that's why, and that goes back to the conversation we were having before we started the podcast about singles versus albums, right? Mm-hmm. Which I don't want to go too deep into, but I feel you, the reality of it is I think there's some disconnect in a full project and how it sounds and how it relates to the consumer or the listener based on the fact that they're trying to chase maybe a sound or a specific demographic opposed to just putting out a great album and not worrying and hoping that the artists themselves can bring something great to the table on top of what they've done.
Right. And what period are you talking about that
at? I mean, I think we've had a little bit of it at different parts. If you look at it now, right, you look at somebody like Drake. 40 may not produce the whole album, but 40's got his hands in every record.
He set the tone, though, because he has the... He set that very hypnotic...
But I feel like there's more of a behind-the-scenes executive producer vibe than there was maybe like 10 years ago, 20 years ago, per se. You look at somebody even like a Billie Eilish, her brother Finesse, whatever his name is, he pretty much did the entire project, or he had his hands on the entire project. So I think that there's like a cohesiveness, but then sometimes it's about having somebody, like you said, kind of reel it all back in and go, these work, this doesn't work, let's fix this, let's make this sound more cohesive. Right. Have you guys ever had a project that you worked on that maybe was memorable in a way to where you were like, man, this all sounds crazy to me?
I was actually about to say that, because going into what you was just pointing out about executive producing, I was blessed with the opportunity to do that for AZ.
Yeah.
Like, I did that on one of his projects. It's called Final Call.
Right.
But originally, it was supposed to be released in 2005. It got pushed back to like 2008, 2009 because they Koch, there was some legalities with Koch, the label that put it out. But I actually did exactly what you talked about. I literally oversaw the production of different people, not just my contribution,
right,
but overseeing other producers to create that cohesiveness.
Yeah.
For a whole body of work.
You
know what I mean? And I did that for him.
Prestige, when you were, I guess, getting your feet wet in the Bad Boy system, what do you think were some of the biggest challenges you faced with working with such a large group of producers in general?
Well, to be honest, I was never like really in it like that.
Okay.
I was more hands off. I was more to myself.
Okay.
Because I was introverted.
Okay.
Which I believe that kind of, I don't know. That was just me at that time.
Right. Of course.
So I would just go off in my corner, make my tracks, make my stuff, and submit it, and learn as you go along the way. The whole Hitman part of my life taught me a lot. I learned a lot from it because just the art of making the records and mixing and mastering and putting them out, that whole process I learned. I first started out like a studio rat. I used to go into people's sessions.
Yeah.
That's when you was used to be able to do that.
Yeah.
Go into like a Lil' Kim session or like who else? A Heavy D session, or whoever artist I could be, get in the session to, and just sit down there and listen and soak it up, how they put the record together, how they mixed it, and how they put it out, the whole process.
Yeah.
So I believe that part is really missing.
Okay.
In the game, because if a lot of newer producers got to be exposed to that, they would understand it and be much better at it.
Right. Okay, makes sense. Well, the reason why I asked the question really is because, nowadays, collaboration's pretty big from all different angles, whether it's loops or, maybe somebody's got a better relationship than somebody else and they work together. Paul, when you kind of first started with the Beatminerz, how did you guys work together? Like, what was the, because, if you're going back, 25 years, how did that work out?
Yeah, when I was with the Beatminerz, it was a combination of two things. It was like we would bring our individual ideas to the table, and the artists within the camp, whether it was Tech and Steel, Buckshot, Helter Skelter, OGC, they would pick the tracks from us and they would record them. But like, there were times where, let's say Evil D was doing a record and we're all in the studio, we would just bring whatever ideas to the table. It could be something as simple as background vocals. Like, on Bucktown, we screaming Bucktown, and and it's a chorus of us.
Yeah.
Or an I Got You Open remix with the Barry White sample, the Dug Down. It's just everybody in the room. You know what I mean? And that's minor. That's not like actually making a beat. It would still be the individuals making the beat, but then the collective contributions in the sessions would be what you hear as the end result. But after the days of the Beatminerz, I took it upon myself to mentor what we call beat makers, because a lot of them didn't know how to produce records.
Right.
They may have good ideas, and like you just mentioned, I may have relationships that they don't have, and I can walk something in. So say somebody has a nice beat, but it just needs finishing. It needs more. You know what I mean? It needs structure, or it needs a hook, or it needs some type of reference to lead it to a song. I would bring that to the table.
Right.
And I would always make sure that anything I put my name and my stamp on, if it's a collaboration, they get their proper credits, their percentage of publishing, whatever the case may be. I always was open to being a mentor to young producers.
Okay.
I still am to this day. That's one thing I talk to Prestige about. It's one thing I talk to you about what we do at Creative Space events. You know what I mean? So,
yeah. So I want to switch the combo up just a little bit, because I think it's important we talk about the business side of production, because I think a lot of times, especially young producers, don't realize that they're a brand, first of all. Second of all, when they make music, that's a product that they have, right? So, Prestige, when did you realize it was time to focus on business as opposed to maybe just making music?
Well, my process, you got to understand the timing that I started to do the music, because like it was all about trying to get a hit.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's all about trying to get a hit, because and I was just focused on that, try to get on these albums, try to get my chops up, try to learn, try to get like, it's funny you said at Bad Boy. When I was with Puff, I mean, I don't think I was just there, but I was just there. Mm-hmm. I didn't get noticed until I started getting tracks with Jay-Z. All of a sudden, he noticed me. So that's how I was getting down, getting tracks with Bad. Even though I was signed to them, I still had problems. Mm-hmm. And then I started branching. I had to get people attention.
Yeah.
Then he took me serious. Mm-hmm. I sold 2 tracks to Jay-Z by myself. And and then these are tracks that Jay-Z gave me a personal check. Call it a J check. I saw his name, Sean Carter, on the check. And I wish that I would have saved
Privileged information, people. Privileged information.
I wish I would have saved. I never, we
got to framed it. Yeah,
I should have framed it, but I don't know how I could frame it. I wouldn't be able to cash it.
Right. For real.
But like, until I started to do that, then he noticed me. Then I got more tracks. I started to work with more artists. I was psyched when I worked with Heavy D.
Rest in peace.
Rest in peace. Heavy D. I was a big Heavy D fan.
Right.
And I got to work with him.
Yeah. Right.
That was, to me, that was dope.
You got to run the titles down, man. You naming names, run down the titles.
Oh,
let's go back with Jay. Run down the songs.
Oh, all right. I did Sunshine and Imagine Play with Jay-Z.
Sheesh.
Sunshine featuring Foxy, right?
Yeah.
Babyface.
Yeah. Babyface,
yeah. That was a high record.
And a lot of people don't know. And this is like, a lot of people don't know. Everybody talks about this Imagine Play record. I came up with the concept of that record.
Okay.
Because one day, like I said, I was vibing off my records. And I had this Renee and Angela record. And I said, Imaginary Playmates. Then I went back to the next day. I said, Imaginary Playmates. Imaginary Player. This sounds like some Jay-Z shit. So, looped it up, played everything, put it together. I ran it down to Rockefeller, to hip hop.
Yeah.
I don't know. Hip hop was like the A&R.
Yeah.
So big shout out to Hittmobb. I just saw him last week. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if people gonna know who hip hop was.
Right. We gonna name names, let people know.
Yeah, hip hop.
Yeah.
So got it to hip hop. Hip hop was like, I don't know. Hip hop wasn't sold on it. I don't know. But and then mind you, I had this beat for a week, just only a week.
Okay.
And after I went to Rockefeller, I went down to Def Jam. I saw Irv Gotti in the office. And then Beatminerz was next door. So I played the beat for Irv. Irv was like, and I believe Ja Rule was in the office too. He was right in the office with Irv Gotti. And I went next door to Bimmy. I played the track with Bimmy. Bimmy said, this would be dope for EPMD.
Wow.
Then I don't know how it happened. Like I was called back in the room. Irv got Jay-Z on the phone.
Wow.
Then, Jay says, Yo, B, don't be selling my beat, son. You know how he talks.
So that was after you did Sunshine.
Yeah, that's after I did Sunshine.
So he already had a work relationship with why he's saying that.
Yes,
okay.
That was after we did Sunshine.
Okay.
Crazy.
And, I never forget that J check. A personal check with Sean Carter.
J check.
A J check. But
that's big.
But that record was like, I guess it was like one of everyone's favorite records that from him this day.
To this stands the test of time.
Yeah, 2000.
You only had to do it once, right?
Exactly.
Right.
You got to do it once. All you got to do is once.
Got to do a good once. And then you're good.
That's it.
Yeah.
And to this day, I did that, 98? And it's 2024. I still hear it playing out of cars to this day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Crazy. Yeah, I mean, the business obviously has its ups and downs too. there's challenges. Like you said, sometimes you're sitting there for hours making music. Nobody's paying attention to you. Nobody's listening. You give people beats, they record to them. You never know if they're going to come out or not. Then sometimes they come out, you don't get paid.
Right.
There's a lot of challenges.
No, but when at my time, that wasn't happening like that.
Okay.
That only happened until we got into the digital age.
Okay.
You always get a deposit at least.
Yeah, of course.
Because best believe, in order for you to go back, in order for them to get the beat, we had to track it.
Yeah.
And so
2-inch reels.
Yeah, before we get to tracking, it had to be
A check.
the first half.
Yeah.
In order for tracking.
Oh yeah. Nowadays the album's out, you don't even get your front end.
Of course. So, now that wasn't my era, people doing that. Now I believe it's because of the digital space that we in.
Yeah.
You can record like a ton of tracks. And
decide to even use your record.
Yeah.
And call you for it. Yeah.
But you know what the problem with, what the thing about that is? We still get bullshit records, even though they do that.
Right. And we still ain't getting paid up front. That's another thing.
But I'm just saying.
Yeah.
By them still doing it, recording and think they doing something, when you listen back to the records, it's still like,
Nope.
it's still a no.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to insult this generation with production, but I don't hear for what they doing, like with all the access to sounds that you have today that we didn't have at our time.
Yeah.
And these kids don't understand that. The access they have now. If we had that back then, the whole taking the beat out of taking the drums,
Stem separation.
Stem separation.
Yeah.
If we had
that's
that
the
back
latest
then,
technology. Yeah.
you know what? You know how much?
It's funny because I was just
How
listening.
much easier it would be.
Huh?
How much easier and less time consuming it would be.
Oh yeah.
I was just listening to a producer who did a whole project with a well-known rapper, and he's using stem separation crazy, and it's just using the actual records and piecing it together. And I was like, okay, I see what's going on.
Right.
Yeah.
Paul, what are some other ups and downs that maybe producers haven't talked about enough or should have more shine light on it?
Absolutely great question. And this is where we're going to take people to school. Y'all ready? So I'm currently still in the process of collecting back royalties on albums I worked on from like over 10 years ago. And to not get into the details, but just give some insight, I'm basically saying that some of the albums I've worked on that have sold gold or platinum or whatever, I earn my performance royalties, which is my BMI, quarterly. Not a problem. I'm talking about album sales. Like basically if you're getting statements from these major labels biannually, whether it's like a major label like Warner or Sony Universal, right? And I could say out of these companies, Universal was the most compliant, meaning that they'll contact you, they set up what they call a portal where you could literally see your statements and the activity of the records you produced and the recoupment value based on what it actually sold, and you have a gauge of when they expect to see your money. But some of these other companies don't move as fast,
right?
So now you got to bring in a lawyer. You know? So
and that costs money.
Yeah, exactly. And it's daunting, but I feel like it's necessary. And I think that my blessing is that I kept copies of all of my producer agreements from the beginning of my career to now.
Okay.
I archived every last one of them. And mind you, I'm doing this before the digital age. So I transcribed physical documents into PDF, digital documents, and kept them in my computer for years.
Okay.
So that if I needed to pursue any legal action, or if I had to be in a situation where I needed to hire a litigator, I could pursue these back royalties. And it's important because how many times have we seen in the internet some producers trying to sue somebody for some royalties they never received? I remember even Pete Rock got into it with Nas recently, like maybe a year or two ago, chasing back royalties off of, I don't know if it was Illmatic or some other work he might have done, but I'm just saying, this is a problem that does exist with producers. Yeah. And it's an ongoing thing. And
it's a broken system.
Yeah.
The label system is a broken system when it comes to payout.
Absolutely.
Well, feeding off what you just said, I had all my contracts and all my contracts got flooded out in my basement years ago. And I wasn't able to recover all my hard copies. I asked my lawyer. My lawyer passed recently, so I wasn't able to get my contracts back.
Wow.
Rest in peace, Kendall Minter.
Kendall Minter.
Yeah.
Kendall Minter. He was
attorney,
well-known attorney.
Yeah.
Well-known black attorney.
Yep. Yep.
So
Represented a lot of clients we know.
yes, and I'm in trying to be in litigation to get back on I get all my my performance royalties, but not my mechanical royalties. And same thing. So at least that part we had the contracts and we went through that process.
Right.
But I guess remember, and I could say it this way. The music business was never made to make you rich. It's all about getting into the door. You break out, you can do other things, or you can have your own productions, your own. In these days, and it wasn't like when we first started, because when you everything was expensive back then.
Yeah.
To put out anything was expensive.
Yeah, it was.
To the cost of doing a record, was insane.
Producing it, marketing it, video.
But let's even take a step back, because a lot of people don't really realize how much money it took to just become a producer.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, the buy-in.
The board, the speakers, the mics. Nowadays, you can do a lot of stuff on your phone.
Yeah.
You can record it, make a beat, record it. You could upload it to YouTube, DistroKid, promote it on social medias,
My God.
put it on YouTube, literally in the same hour for free.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So the people don't realize. That's why I feel like there's a lot of producers that actually devalue themselves. Like I see these buy 5 beat exclusives for 99 cents.
Oh my God!
I don't want to get too much into that because we're not really here for that. But there's definitely a devaluation, I think, in the producer community that needs to be addressed.
Absolutely.
But I'm more concerned about where you guys think music production is going. We talked earlier about some of the things that we used to do back in the day, 2-inch tape. Just the mixes and how you had to cut things up and splice things and have everything tracked out on a board, and God forbid somebody touch something when you had a piece of paper or everything. Do not touch.
Right.
Oh, there was no lock on it. There was do not touch, or this thing's gonna be ruined. Right.
And the recalls.
Oh my God.
The recalls. I had a record when I produced the Notorious of Biggie. Now, back then it was 48 tracks. I used to lock. Mostly all my tracks was 48. Because I like to have a lot of sounds in my stuff.
Yeah.
I like the big sound.
Yeah.
So I had 48 tracks, and the first idea, people don't know this. The first version of Notorious, it had 2 verses of Biggie on it.
Okay.
And I submitted to Puff like that with 2 verses of Biggie on it. So it was dope. It was dope the way I had it. But he took 1 verse off, put himself on it, and he put Lil' Kim on it. And he added, "He is, we are." No. And I had the sample Duran Duran on it. So he added a whole bunch of stuff to it, and stuff that kind of changed the vibe where I was trying to go with it. I never forget this. I called him in Switzerland. I guess he was at Switzerland at this time. I said, "Yo, Puff, we can't put this out like that." And I'm shocked he listened to me. He let me record the record, and I fixed it. He let me record the record, and I fixed it, and that's the version you hear today.
Okay.
Round of applause for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's an interesting story.
That's a classic record.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's funny because when you start having these conversations, the memories start coming out. Might not be something you think about every day, but when you're when people hear that, when they watch this and see that, nobody else knows that except for him, Puff, and a handful of people, right? So, that's why I love having these conversations, because sometimes these memories,
these little nuances
can give some insight, because again, if you don't know what it took to even mix a record back then, just imagine now all these new lyrics, you got to go back and do the reset on all the levels because it's not saved anywhere, right? So you got to go back and literally remix the record.
No, they were saved.
Okay.
Remember, working on SSL board is
right. You can lie. Okay.
It's
It was
know,
on
the
2
mix
inch reel, but they recall like the settings and stuff like that. Yeah.
Everything's, but you know, that take a minute to recall the settings.
Yeah.
That's the whole thing.
I caught the end of that vibe.
Yeah.
I was recording on 2 inch tape. I got 2 inch tapes.
Yeah.
Can't even play them anymore.
Like, it's crazy because he and I really know what it's like to make records when it was no digital at all. Like, make records that came out in the world, you know? So, yeah, I mean, like, so for you to mix that, you basically took the sounds you wanted to keep and took out the sounds you didn't want.
But as I remember doing Notorious, we started to use Pro Tools.
Okay.
We started to use Pro Tools. That's the first session that I remember using Pro Tools.
But it was on the SSL board.
Yeah, we had everything tracked on the SSL board, and we using Pro Tools to like, you know, everything was still out on the board, and I didn't really realize the purpose of using Pro Tools back
at that
then.
time. Yeah, because it was new.
But I remember us using Pro Tools.
Right. All right. So let's talk about just dealing with some of those obstacles. Right. So, Paul, when you were knee deep in it, producing all these records for Duck Down, did you come across any obstacles just as a producer dealing with the artist or the process of making music at that point?
I would say one of the things, like when I did the single that we talked about, it had so many vocals on it, 5 artists, Helter Skelter, LGC. I had to narrow it down to make it like a cohesive body of work and still be a single. Because the original version, if you had the album, it was like 4 minutes long, or maybe longer, like 4.5 minutes. So I had to scale it down and not lose the art of each artist and make sure it was cohesive. You know what I mean? So for sure, that was one of the challenges for a record that people really know. But then aside from that, I dealt with a few sample clearance issues on a few records. Like at the tail end of the work I did with Duck Down, I did a Barry White sampled record that I had to replay.
Yeah.
And, you know, it came out dope, but it was just not the same as the original.
Of course.
You know how that goes, Sam.
Right.
Man. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I think one of the things that we also, you know, as creatives sometimes, that it might be introverted or not used to being out in public at parties or at events and whatnot. You know, we always talk about networking and building relationships and how important that is to the overall perspective of being a creative. How important were relationships in your career, Prestige? How, like, give me maybe somebody that stood out that really kind of, you know, left a mark on your career.
I could say someone that stood up. I could say Puff.
Yeah.
Worker, you know, at the same time, I know they say, you know, Puff's not a producer, but to me, I was there. Right. Puff is a producer. He might not be technically, he might not know how to
make a beat itself.
Program a beat or nothing, but
he know how to put a record together.
He know how to assemble people to put the record together. He know how to do that.
In all fairness, that is a producer too.
Yeah, that is a producer.
And that's what I feel like a lot of the younger generation might be missing out on, you know, being able to make a good beat. But there's beat makers and there's producers. We always talk about that.
Yeah, and part of being a great producer is having a vision and see it before
and after.
Yeah, no, before, you know, you gotta, to me, how I envision a record as I go along and see who could fit on it, how the hook should be. And most of the time, at that time, when we did beats, the music would write itself.
Okay.
If you know what I'm saying.
Makes sense, yeah.
The music would write itself. So, like, you know, at our time, like, we would have certain beats go off and people would be like, damn, I hear Jay on that. Y'all hear Big on that.
Yeah.
And, you know, we don't get that no more. And, like, and that was the main era. Like, I heard Pac, I can hear Pac on that. That kind of energy.
Yeah.
Is like really missing today.
Yeah. I think also too, like, you know, sometimes when producers get to a certain level, whether it be, you know, they got their first placement or they've been around for a while, I think people don't realize how important learning still is.
Absolutely.
You know, S1, the homie S1, I asked him a similar question, like, how do you find motivation, like, to continue to go and be better than you were, you know, your last record? And he said, every year I take 2 weeks off from making music and I just make a list of things that I want to learn. Sometimes it's about music. Sometimes it's about, I want to go learn how to fix a tire. I want to go learn how to make a quiche, whatever the case may be. But you take the time out to learn because it stimulates your mind. How do you challenge yourself in today's market to continue to learn, to be better, stay motivated? I want you both to quickly answer that.
Well, I'll be honest. I'm always trying to network with new talent.
Okay.
One of the ways I do that is your events.
Okay.
I get to meet new producers. I get to meet new artists. I meet new songwriters, and just build a community of talent that I can communicate with and throw ideas, bounce off of them.
Yeah, of course.
Sometimes we collaborate, sometimes we don't, but we all know each other now.
Right.
You know what I mean? So that allows me to bridge the gap in terms of that disconnect between me being an elder statesman in the music culture and someone younger. Sometimes I do collaborate. Like I said, I got to work with a producer that I met through your platform, Evo, out of Philly. We collaborated on a record that came out really dope. Shout out to Sherrod Starks. But also, technology-wise, I'm always trying to like educate myself on new software and stuff like that. Engineers I work with put me up on Ableton, or one of a young composer that like comes to me to mentor him. He uses Fruity Loops, and I used to shun Fruity Loops.
Yeah.
Like, nah. I'm an MPC guy, you know what I mean? But once I learned it, I was like, oh, okay, all right, that's cool.
Yeah.
You know? So it's like, don't be too biased about the nuances of technology.
Right.
Find your place in it,
right,
and see how it works for you. Because again, it ain't always about the equipment; it's about what you do with it.
True.
Right. So whether it's software or hardware, the ideas are here.
Right.
Excuse me. It's
the ear, not the gear sometimes, right?
Knocking my hat off. But yeah, you know what I'm saying? So it's from here. So it doesn't matter what I use.
What about you, P? Like, what something you maybe follow along with or try to stay motivated by?
To me, the journey is backwards.
Okay.
Meaning that, I feel that all the great things has been done already. And I want to like vibe on the great things, that great records I was done, and try to recreate them into today's feel. And I've been exposed in the main piece of advice that I give a lot of producers coming up: listen to a lot of records, listen to a lot of records, listen to a lot of records. You know why? Because you would know how to, you would get a knowledge of like what is good. I guess because a lot of people don't know what's good. If you don't, the standards are low.
Set the bar high enough.
You got to set the bar, and I like stuff that really moves me. I like to feel it. I like to have like to me, the music has to be like a plate of food. You have to eat it with your ears.
Okay.
That's how I feel it.
I like that.
You got to eat it with your ears. It's like a meal sonically. So that's how I always like my beats full like that.
Okay.
And if it ain't full, like, don't really, you mentioned the Neptunes, right? And this one track they did, Give It To Me, right?
Right.
I always felt that could have been mixed way better than what it was, because it sounded. You would hear like the real full records come on, right, in the club, and when they put that Give It To Me record on, it like it's not heavy enough.
Yeah, it's a lot of records like that. Yeah.
And I like it.
I think to a degree that was their sound for a while. I think over time I've heard the sound that they created start to evolve, and their records sounded sonically a lot better over time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Neptunes was like what 2-3 years in by the time that record came out.
Yeah.
But I still think is the mixing technique. It's the mixing technique.
Right.
Absolutely. I think a lot of times, and not saying that this is what they did, but a lot of times, sometimes people cut corners on Sonics. You know what I mean? Like, I know, like, even like the mixtape era, like they were just putting this stuff out to put it out, just
and
to
it wasn't
like
even mixed,
just to get it vibe. Because when you do play loud in the club, nobody cares.
Right.
But if you're listening to it at home, and all of a sudden, like, this record comes in mid, and all of a sudden, next record comes in, like, and blowing the speakers out. Because I was just funny. I was in a club a few weeks ago, and even like Shook Ones. Probably, I think got voted the best hip hop record of all time recently, right? Like, Shook Ones comes in super low. And it's just that, like, when you're trying to mix records in sometimes with some of the other hip hop records, like you said, it doesn't always, but at the same time, you know what you're hearing, you know what you're ready to hear. And sonically, sometimes all somebody got to do is just go, let's put this a little bit louder than everything else.
And I can honestly speak for myself. Early in my career, the mixes of the records that I made early in my career compared to now, I kind of cringe because I feel like the beat ideas were great.
Yeah.
The songs are classics for the fans.
Yeah.
But I critique myself as a producer on the sonics and the mixing, and I feel like I could have done way better mixes.
Yeah.
you know, with what I know now. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and also technology a little bit too, I think helps with that.
Yeah.
So just like, to double back on the mixing of records, is like, that's just my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because you remember, people could be saying like, "Oh, you a hater? It sold millions. Everybody else around was vibing with it." But I just say, well, I always like things at 100%.
Yeah.
Not 90%.
And you're creative.
Yeah,
so
I'm creative, so I have my idea.
To speak on your opinion, for sure. I would agree with that because sonically, I remember. I know who mixed that record. My man Duro. You know what I'm saying? Who worked with Clue. I feel like that record probably could have been mixed way better, but the beat worked for what it what it was.
And also too, I think in that era we listened to music differently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How do we listen to music when we were outside? We had the big ass 18-inch joints in the car.
Exactly.
So everything was loud. Nobody cared about the mix. It was just loud. Nowadays we're listening to earpods, our headphones, on a laptop, on TV.
To a lot of sub-bass records.
Yeah, so it's a lot. It's driven by a different type of animal nowadays.
Different frequencies,
yeah. So.
For sure.
I mean, we covered a lot of ground today, guys. Hittmobb podcast. We talked about crate digging, your relationship, records you produced, things you learned, obstacles, the business. We covered a lot of ground. I'm sure we could probably talk for like 4 or 5 more hours. But let's just talk really quick. Just giving the listeners an idea of
what to expect.
Not what to expect necessarily, but like what you think they should be focusing on right now if they're a new creative. What should a new creative be focusing on right now?
With that one.
Listen to more records. Listen to old records.
Right.
Listen to like, and
train your ears,
maybe
right?
Train your ears. Maybe if you don't like, I don't know if I don't know if a lot of producers like the 90s era, but for some reason it still works. And pay attention to that because like to me everything sounds and feels the same. So when it's like that, it's hard for you to have a record chart. That's why what year was that? It was this year or last year they said no hip hop record was number 1.
I think that was last year.
It was last year, right?
So, yeah.
So maybe, everybody is like using the same sounds. And like I said before, we have like it's so much sounds available today.
Yeah, it's true.
Why all the records sound everybody using the same clap, the same hi-hats, the same bass. It's so boring.
Drums and snares.
It's not inspiring.
Right.
It's not like...
It's funny you say that because when I go back to what I mentioned earlier about mentoring some of these young producers that I come across, I put them up on albums.
Yeah, of course.
Like, yo, you ever listen to the first Wu-Tang album? You ever listen to Slum Village? You know what I'm saying? And, these are hip-hop albums to me that are timeless and of a certain level of quality, regardless of that time frame, but they just were staples that you could listen back to and be like, wow, you know what I'm saying? And a lot of these young composers don't know these albums. And when I put them up on it, it inspires them to think differently on the creative level,
I always equate it to like opening up a new store in a neighborhood, right? Like in order to know I'm going to open up a deli in this neighborhood, meanwhile there's like 14 delis in a 3-block radius, right? Like you got to know how to stand out in a market like that.
Right.
So if I'm making the same sandwiches, I got the same selection, I got the same kind of look, the same kind of menu. Like eventually it becomes, I can just walk in any store, but why would I want to keep coming back to this one place?
Right.
You're doing the history. You're learning about, okay, well, this place has a parking lot right next to it versus that place. Or, I need to know how to even be hospitable as an owner. I need to know, what's going to excite somebody's eye when they walk in the room, what kind of colors, you know what I mean? Like, you got to be that cognizant about what people want in general. Right. And I think that's part of the problem is that a lot of people are chasing validation for what's hot now.
Right.
Meanwhile, a lot of these records were recorded like 2, 3, 4 years ago, coming out now. And now we're really looking for 25, 26, 27, 28. But we also want to hear things that really provoke out an emotion, get us excited.
Yes.
Give us a feel. And I feel like a lot of the kids, and you're hearing a lot of what's going on now in drill, where they're flipping R&B samples because they grew up on, or they grew up listening to that when their younger parents may be playing it. Right. So like the 90s, the early 2000s, think about it.
Yeah.
If I was born 16 years ago, right, which is 2008, it's crazy, you can say.
I know, right?
My old school rap is Lil Wayne and 50 Cent.
Yes, it's true.
You know what I'm saying?
True.
So There's a lot of
Kanye
variables.
West.
Yeah, a lot of variables. You know what I'm saying? So I appreciate you guys having me.
Thank you for having me, man.
Like I said, we could be here for a while.
Yeah, we could be here forever.
Sure.
But just Hittmobb podcast is going down. We're focusing on the producers, legacies, really just kind of create that information system for everybody to understand how important it is to learn before you walk and just do the things that make you find longevity in this game of this crazy music industry.
Yes.
So we out here, man. J Hatch, Creative Space Events, Hittmobb podcast. Peace.
This episode of Hittmobb is dedicated to Jason Hatchin, known to the world as J Hatch. Man, we definitely didn't see this coming, man. You know, we filmed this first episode a few months ago. Great energy, good spirits. We had a lot of fun. And unfortunately, Jay's health got worse over time in the last, few weeks. And here we are. So we want to take the time out to thank him for his contributions to not only Hittmobb and our content series, but music culture, creative space events that he produces. Shout out to his family. Thank you for everything, brother. We love you. Peace.